by the university, but is completely independent, and we are the largest business development and strategy firm in northern Sweden. We're 40 consultants, and I think some students might know of us, and quite a few know of LTU Business at the university, but not many know that we are the largest actor when it comes to strategy consulting here as well. And I started working here 4.5 years ago with the intent to actually fill the white space of consulting in northern Sweden. There are no actual consultancy firms when it comes to classic management consulting or strategy north of Sundsvall, more or less. There are many smaller companies, but most of these are one-man shows. And I think you need to be a viable player and to actually grow and be a more or less a viable partner to the industry. You need to have a few experts, and you need to have quite a few consultants to be able to staff a case and really commit to a problem. And that's the journey we're on right now, and we're building the team, and I mean, we're recruiting all the time. A viable possibility for you as well, because we've had a few students who have joined us after they graduate. Most of them have worked maybe 1 or 2 years in Stockholm, and then they have moved back to Luleå and joined us, and to be a part of our strategy team. And we're 40 consultants, but around 10 to 12 of us are dedicated to running strategy projects, and it's extremely well positioned when it comes to time, mainly due to the large investments that's going on in the more or less heavy industry. I think most of you know about, well, of course, Northvolt, and you know about hybrid, and now the H2 Green Steel will drive a significant transition when it comes to the composition and types of actors that will be present in our region for the coming 20, 30 years. And it never has there been this need for an actual partner when it comes to strategy and business development. So we're building on that, and we're trying to build that very rapidly, and it's a really interesting time right now to do so. But we do a lot of different work. I mean, later today, I will help Luleå Basket with their strategy as well. Yes, that's a pro bono thing, but still we're trying to help different types of organizations in the northern parts of Sweden with different things. But with that said, I'm going to share with you some, I mean, it's a general framework of how the thinking is around efficiently running a project to actually crack a case. And I see a lot of, let's say, mistakes that many junior consultants and especially students do, and that's completely fine, but you have to take a learning from them. And many of them has to do with both how you run a project, but also how you actually efficiently package a solution to actually get some sort of impact with the client, because that's everything that matters in the end. It doesn't matter if you put 1 hour or 100 hours on doing an analysis if the client doesn't understand it. So I think that's the key thing, and something that I think is really important to understand even from the get-go, that you have to create impactful material. Otherwise, it's crap. No one will care about how many hours or how good you are in Excel or stuff like that. Packaging the solution is really, really key, and that's something that you increasingly become aware of the more senior you become. But it's good to know it from the get-go. Okay, so when it comes to just laying some sort of foundation, why should you even run project-based work altogether? And there are some benefits and challenges, and I think most of these things is quite straightforward when you understand it, but I think it's really important to just highlight some of the key things here. Of course, the benefits, it targets focus. you combine, you have some sort of combined efforts aimed at just solving a specific problem. And it's really important, of course, that you understand the specific problem that you will solve, but it's really rewarding to just put all your effort into solving one specific problem. And also the same thing goes for the results. Everything is focused on just getting the result, getting things done. And doing this in a teaming environment is really, really great when it comes to learning, because you're forced to actually work really close to each other, and you're forced to create an atmosphere where you actually learn and where you build upon each other's ideas all the time. Some sort of resource optimization, this is of course dependent on how well positioned and how good you are at actually leveraging different types of resources. But you should be able to pick out the right resources just to solve the specific problem at hand. And of course, I mean, I have never had a more steep learning curve than, I mean, I think I learned more at BCG in 1 week than I did 5 years in college. So it's a really, really steep learning curve going into this and being forced to solve a problem, because I will get back to this later on, but I mean, you can never, you can't fail, you can't give up, you have to solve the problem. And I think just working under a healthy pressure is really, really rewarding for the learning curve. Of course, when it comes to the challenges, I mean, the effort is, you have to be able to focus the effort towards the task and the problem. There is a lot of, one of the key problems that I've seen is related to focusing the effort on the wrong problem or not scoping it right. And that's of course a challenge, but if you get it right, it's really, really rewarding for the project. I mean, time pressure, most of the time, I mean, all the time when you work in a project, there's time pressure, but that can be a good thing as well. Steering is really important, and getting the right amount of feedback and understanding if you're on the right or wrong track is really important as well. The delivery, I mean, this depends on type of project, of course, but if you have a specific project aimed to solve a specific problem, then the delivery requirements are often much higher. But one of the absolutely most important thing is, because if you work under a time pressure with a complex problem, you have to be really good at working hypothesis driven and understanding what is important and what is not important, to have some sort of 80-20 mindset. I think that's both a challenge. It was a huge challenge for me in the beginning. I mean, driving too many hours. I think for the first year I worked between 80 and 100 hours every week, until I was better at just understanding where I could cut corners to make things a bit more efficient. So that's really, really important to just, I mean, I coach students at LTU who wants to get into consulting, and especially some sort of MBB consulting, and I try to coach them into understanding already from the beginning that you need to have some sort of hypothesis-driven view, and you have to just focus on what is important. Otherwise, you won't survive. I mean, the types of work, I get this question quite a lot. I mean, nowadays I can actually say it quite easily. I focus mainly on growth strategies, and also doing a lot of financial, I mean, DDs, VDDs, meaning IMs, investment perspective and stuff like that. But I mean, the types of work you can do is all over the place, and I think you know this as well. But on a high level, when you think about strategy, many think about the business model. I mean, market value, value chain, and general strategy of the company. But most of the time, and what I've been doing most, at least at BCG, was within the operating model, quite a lot within operations and organization. And I think that's really important. area as well. An area where I haven't done a lot of work, but I know some consultancy firms focus a lot, is within the culture, vision, mission, history, and heritage, and things that I understand now is extremely important to actually get a company to run efficiently. I've seen so many times when we handed over a perfect solution. Let's say it's perfect, but some sort of perfect solution to a client, but it hasn't worked anyway, and that's mainly because perhaps the culture at the firm hasn't been set up to actually adapt to changing environments. But you can be in whatever section you first of all you're interested in, but also you might just end up in a specific area where you think it's really interesting to just learn more about. I wasn't too let's say interested in value chains and operations a few years ago, but then I got completely hooked on that, and it's extremely interesting as well, and it's extremely, let's say, statistically and mathematically driven areas. And if you're interested in those things, I mean, there are all types of different cases you can work on within consulting. Some just types of cases that we've been doing for the past few years. Some sort of reaching a goal or vision where we've looked into operations and market potential. Work within the supply chain, and where you touch upon operations, processes, also steering, sales, and markets. A lot of cases has been aimed within the area of trying to optimize the market potential and trying to capture them, and that goes a lot in line with strategy and market insights as well. And as I said, a lot of DDs, meaning due diligence processes, where you actually assess a target company in a short period of time. Most of the time you just assess and test if the model for actually purchasing a company is viable, and if it's something that is in line with the buying company's expectations. So that's an area that we've been working quite heavily within for the past few years, and something I did a lot at BCG as well. Okay, so an agenda in the agenda has to do with the sort of the phases of the project, and I will go through this in these 4 phases through the setup, the ramp up, the execution, and ending. And if we start with the first part here, it's about understanding the problem question, scoping the content, but also scoping the project. And it's more or less to just get a holistic and impactful, should we say, actionable start of the project. And the truth of the matter is actually that you can actually solve at least 50% of the case already before the project has started, if you understand what the problem is, and if you scope the method you will use to actually solve it in an efficient way. So understanding the problem, and I think this is something that most of you guys have heard of. I mean, if you ever Google just cracking a case, or just understanding how to go about different types of case competitions and stuff like that, I think understanding the problem is the most important part, but it is. And that's because even if you start working at a consultancy firm, you won't be a part of this. You won't in the beginning be a part of actually setting up the project or stuff like that. You will just execute on your modules, and that's fine. But what you learn, if you understand even from the beginning what the problem is, it's much easier for you to actually execute your module and take part of the project in a more actionable way. And right now, in academia, where you are right now, this is, of course, extremely important to just have a very, very clear view and spend unnecessary time on actually trying to understand the problem really, really granularly in the beginning. And what I mean by this is the main problem at the start of the project must be identified in order to formulate the correct question, or sometimes questions that needs to be answered. try to really understand what the key problem is. And let's say you might be wrong, and that's okay, but you need this as a first guidance to see where you have the biggest questions and how you can actually solve it by building different sort of blocks or modules or tasks to solve it. And most of the time you have some sort of overarching question that is used to break it down in sub-issues, and we do this all the time. And these sub-issues most of the time is what we call modules, things that are quite actionable, things that I will get into this later on, but if you need to understand why a process doesn't work at the company, you can break that process down into sub-processes. And these sub-processes could be something that your colleagues, or you can divide them in the team to just understand what is the problem in each area. And something that I think is quite important right now to understand that at least when you work with a client, sometimes the question that the client has is not the correct one. So you need to often take a lead in further understanding the problem that you need to answer. And one tool that I actually keep it by 50%, because right now you need to understand what types of problems you need, what types of analysis you need to solve the sub-questions that you have. And there are many different types of tools here. I mean, root cause analysis, driver trees, or trying to conceptualize a problem. It's different ways to go around this, but I think this is really important to just drive it down and make it easy, so that you can actually subdivide the problem into something that collectively makes up a solution for the overarching problem. And spend time on this, do it. And I think right now when you're still studying, practice on doing this. It's really important. Some sort of, I mean, example, if we have a problem of how to achieve a 10% growth and a 15% margin in a vacuum cleaner segment, that might impose some potentially operational requirements, but also, of course, some sort of market potential that you need to look further into. And some, I mean, this is a really high level, yes, but when it comes to operational side, you might need to understand how do we organize this? Are there some bottlenecks when it comes to supply chain? Are there supporting processes that we need to think about? And of course, market potential, you can scope this in many different ways, but just understanding the attractiveness trends and best suited go-to-market models for this type of venture, whatever it might be. But it's just an example of driving some sort of tree to understand what do we actually need to look at. And then we get into just when we understand the problem, then we understand the content, and then we can scope the project. And most of the things that you should be, I mean, when it comes to the project, define time, define, of course, deliverables, task modules, and sometimes, I mean, cost, if that's something that you need to do. And just try to align the modules and try to be efficient on the progress of each module to understand when you can also realign resources. And there are different, I won't go into this in any further depth because you can do this in different ways, but I mean, Gantt charts and stuff like that is really central just to get a view on when things need to be done and what the deliverables are and how they actually interact with each other. Okay, so the next part, if we could jump straight into the execution, but I think there is a ramp up phase as well. And the ramp up is related to actually creating some sort of process for collaboration, create the first output, create the storyline, and prepare analysis. And if we did 50% first, I think at least 25% is done here, where you actually create the output before you have the data. And something that, I mean, as for now in academia, you won't need this as much. But I think some things are important to set up, both when it comes to the team and when it comes to the persons involved in the team. When it comes to the team, you need to have, well, the organization, and it relates to resources, but also the sizing of the different modules that you will engage upon. And then try to understand and separate content meeting and process meeting. Content meeting is where you actually meet up in the team and discuss the progress and discuss the actual content. This is where the magic happens. This is where you actually discuss how well we are addressing the problem. And I think this is something that takes a bit more time, and try to separate this from process meeting. Process meeting is just related to the updates and next steps, and you won't go into depth, and try to separate these. But something that is important already now for you is to try to, for yourself as well, try to understand what are the personal development that you're looking for within a specific project, but also the preferred working model. What, when it comes to personal development, of course, what do you want to get out of this? Is this something that you want to develop further into, or is this something that you want to be better at? In right now when you're studying, I mean, if you're always on the data module or the Excel module, perhaps you would like to try something different, or you want to keep expanding into the data module and be really, really good at that. But be very clear about what you want to get out of this, at least for now, for your own sake. And the working model, this is more or less related to how do you want to be contacted? I mean, for example, right now I have a baby at home, and of course that changes the way I can work on a project. So I need other types of communication models, other types of interaction models, and I think it's really important to, in the team, align on these quite early on, so it just avoids a lot of well, inefficiencies, but I mean, conflicts, more or less, to just understand that, okay, this is the working model that you prefer. And okay, this is central. And the more senior you get, the more you will do this. But this is extremely important. And I even say it here, start a project by finishing it. And for a project leader, or in your case, most likely for the whole team, this is where you more or less create an entire output for the case based on the first step, the problem that you discussed, and the sub areas, the modules. Build a output already from the beginning of how you want it solved, and what are your, so the hypothesis you have for the solution, slide it already now, or write it already now. Most of the time we slide it, but make the complete output. I mean, I've created slide decks of 100 slides even before we got the first data dump, just to understand that these are the slides that needs to be created. These are the data points that I need to have validated to understand if we're on the right track or if we're not. And it's okay to be wrong. That's completely fine. But having the output already done forces you to focus on just getting those slides or those problems or those areas analysis done. So it's really, really valuable to have this, and it creates an alignment within the whole team of, okay, this is what needs to be done. This, if we do these slides, then we're more or less done. Of course, you might be wrong. I mean, you might find something in a module that says that, okay, the problem is not the penetration of the Brazilian market. The problem is rather that we need to get into a whole different area, whatever it might be. But this is something that will create a very clear alignment, and something I see with junior consultants is a big problem, and something that I think you, as long as you're studying, you should be focusing on trying to develop further. Create an early hypothesis of the whole solution. When you get here, and you've done the whole slide deck more or less, then you create the output, right? So you created more or less, I mean, you actually, either you're drawn, which we do all the time on paper, the actual exactly how the graphs should look like and what you want on the different graphs. And this makes you understand what the output should look like, and then you understand what data you actually need to create it. This is something that, if you understand the analysis and the output, that's much easier to just understand what sort of data you actually need to solve the problem. And sometimes you might not get all the data you need, or you might be creative in finding the ways to solve this, but this forces you to actually understand what sort of data you need to make the analysis you need to get the output that you're already looking for, not the other way around. So be very, once again, hypothesis driven, and this, as I said, this is reliant on you creating a very, very clear output. I mean, you need to understand what sort of presentation you want to give. And understanding a problem and then understanding analysis, for example, in this is a real case, but I've cleaned it a lot. We need to understand the total market for I think it was, let's see, cat or dog food, cat food. Okay. And in this case, we needed to understand it, and we created the slides of how it should look like. And we knew what would be on all the different axes for all the different analysis we needed to do. And to understand the total market for, in this case, cat food, I've done this for dog food as well, but for cat food, we need to understand all the cat population in the Nordics and average spend per cat. And then you needed to understand, okay, what makes up the cat population? Well, supply, actually some sort of willingness to have a cat, which we try to quantify. And when it comes to spend per cat, I mean, what's the average volume? What's the average price per volume unit of these types of cat food? And then understand, okay, but what types of the cat food were there? And also what are the different types of pricing for the different types of units of volume as well. And once we understood all of this, getting the actual data is much more easier. So I think for all problems, it's really, really important to understand it in the depth, because it's in the depth you understand the complexity of problems, and you get a deeper understanding of what data you also need to actually solve a problem. And then, and not until now, we actually get into the execution, where we actually do the analysis, we actually gather data and stuff like that. And once again, we go back to output first, create output as fast as possible, iterate the hypothesis, and have very efficient steering of the project as well. And here I get back to I think, the overarching thing I want to say, that create output first, because it creates an alignment. But if we start on if we were to have some sort of problem where we're trying to understand, once again, the 10% CAGR and 50% EBIT, first create an output of what you want the slide, for example, to look like. It's some sort of historical performance slide, a few slides perhaps, and then some benchmarks of margins and stuff like that. Then understand the analysis. I mean, this is the same thing as we did here. Understand it in depth. Understand if you need to split it by segments, establish margin, find the cost drivers, and find the most suitable benchmarks from X amount of the competitors. And then, and not until then, you actually go into finding the data that you need for the exact analysis that you want to do. And then you make the analysis, produce it, create an output very, very fast, and see. I mean, this is really, let's see if I highlighted it. No, but the so what is so central. And one problem that I see a lot, I mean, I see still among very senior consultants as well, but creating a, let's say, slide, because slide is very central within consulting, without having a very clear takeaway, an action title, the so what. is meaningless. I've seen many junior and quite often students create really cool analysis data-wise, but they're not able to efficiently communicate this in a slide, and then it's useless. I think what the most parts of an analysis is not the data you crunched, it's about how well you actually were to communicate what the data says. So that's the analysis. And most of the time you just see someone writing market growth in Central America. And then you have some graph or stuff like that. But what does that mean? It tells me nothing. I need to understand, for example, if one of the key takeaways, so what is that market growth in Central America is accelerating, positioning our company well, or something like something. You need to have a title or say something with an analysis about how it is relevant for the actual project or the problem that you're solving. Otherwise, it's just words. And I think that's central and something that you really should take with you. Understand what the data says. Otherwise, it's just numbers. It's not an analysis. Okay, so when it comes to working hypothesis-driven, it's just to focus the effort, and it's really fun as well. I mean, you need to have your smartness, but also trying to be very proactive in what the solution is. So do not waste time on making analysis look perfect rather than sharing results. So as soon as you have let's say a slide with some key takeaways, try to share it as soon as possible so that you can actually change the hypothesis if that's needed. And most of the time, which I try to illustrate on the right-hand side here, is that the hypothesis, of course, in a case might go back and forth quite heavily in the beginning. You might be completely wrong. So no, it's not on the operational side. I think the problem here is on transport. I think it's on sales or wherever. And you might jump back and forth quite a lot. So in the beginning, you actually need to create a lot of output to be able to dismiss or prove hypothesis. But after a while, you will see that, okay, I think we're on the right track. And that's where you create the actual, the real impactful output as well. So that's why output first is really central, so that you don't waste time on making perfect slides for something that won't even matter because the hypothesis was wrong. So try to share output as fast as possible. And also this makes it more possible to actually shift focus and resources. And I think this is something that you already do. I mean, if you're working on a project and you divide the work in the beginning, but then most of you are done, but in the end, you just need to focus it on the most impactful parts at the end. Then, of course, you try to reallocate the resources in a way that makes the output very strong. Okay, the ending, and this is, I mean, I could spend days talking about just ending, and this is more or less about creating an impactful delivery of the results, and that's the key thing. And I think that's perhaps the most important part. So I could spend a lot of time within this area, but I won't have time for this today. But one of the key things here is that the presentation, what you actually show in the end, is the only thing that more or less matters. So you need to have, as I said, an action-oriented and clear presentation with insightful insights. That's the worst sentence I've written, but this is most important part. This is, I mean, especially once again among junior consultants, I see really good analysis go to waste because the presentation isn't good enough. And one thing that, I mean, I think this is an area that should be improved even further. I think this is really important, but it comes to the learning process. After finishing a project, learnings must be brought back. I mean, for the group, understanding what worked well and what did not work so well, but also understanding on an individual level. Did the project deliver on my own personal KPIs and goals, i.e. I wanted to work more on the data module, or I wanted to avoid the data module, or stuff like that. This is an important part on your own development, to understand what works well for you and what doesn't work well, and try to feed it back after you finish the project. Okay, so I will jump into some common failures and also best practices. Best practices, some of the key here is that have clear leadership and roles. I think that you need to have someone that is a coordinating leader. And that might just be the one that's, at least for you, the one that holds the master. Someone who just have the overarching responsibility of completely aligning the material that's created from different persons, so that you have that at least. So I think a team need to have some sort of leadership, and that leadership might shift for the next project. That's not important, but you need to have someone that is in charge and just guides the overarching work. Have clear demands and expectations. This creates efficiency. And once again, output, emphasize early output. You need to have output very early on to just understand if the hypothesis is right or not. And then eyes on the prize relates to the storyline. Understand if you have a clear view of what the problem is and what the story of your solution is, then you can keep the story much more straight, so that you don't end up solving something that wasn't relevant for the problem. And always have a hypothesis-driven approach. Think about what the output is and what the solution is already before you actually start doing some analysis. Have a very clear alignment, both within the team but also with the client, so that you have clear responsibilities from both sides. And then, of course, expectations management. Be sure to understand what is within the scope and what is not within the scope of the project. So having some expectations management is something that will get more and more important the more senior you get, but it's important, more or less impossible to run an efficient project if the scope continuously changes because of poor leadership, meaning that the project leader caves down to the client and says, yes, we can look at that as well, yes, and everything, but you need to understand that have a very clear structure for what you're actually solving. If you more or less deviate from that structure too much, it's impossible to actually create a good output. Some problems that we've seen is, of course, related to well, the other side of this. Poor iteration and alignments, meaning that you spend time on doing things that is not impactful and doing stuff that has no value. And that's most of the time it's because you had poor alignment in the beginning of what you actually need to do. Unclear scoping is more or less related to what I said before. Misalignments of scoping between client, team leaders, and sometimes even other external parties. It drives uncertainties and drives inefficiencies. Well, over deliveries also. There's a learning I had when I worked on a quite long case that we had a readout with the client every week. So we tried to keep we couldn't over deliver the first or the second week, because then we would need to have the same amount of delivery even the week after that, and the week after that, and the week after that. So we needed to have a clear understanding of how much can actually be delivered within these days that we're working. And one area that I think this is, if you follow any meme accounts when it comes to consulting, data extraction from client is one of the most common memes, I think, but that's because extracting data from client is often very, very tricky. So that's why I emphasize understanding the data that you need really, really clear, so that you only gather the data that you need for your analysis. Because if you're too broad, then you might not get the data in the end that you actually need. And something that I mentioned in the beginning is you can never fail. I mean, you need to create a solution. You need to solve what you actually promise to do. So you can you should aim at doing it very efficiently and impactful, because I mean the end result needs to be great. And if you have problems within the project or within the alignment of how you actually conduct this, either within the team or between you and the client, that will only drive burden on you and the team. So try to be as I mean, as clear as possible when it comes to solving all of these problems that I put on this slide, because you still have to you have to deliver. So it's more or less aligning or mitigating the risk of having a lot of burden on you. Okay, some things I knew, I wish I knew when going into consulting. It's about persistent hard work. I mean, there's no magic bullet. It's about doing it all the time, and it's extremely rewarding, of course. But it's more or less about putting in the hours. You need to do it a lot, put in a lot of hours in. I can't remember if I put it later on, but Excel is something that I think is under taught at the universities. I think it's really important to be, I mean, you don't need VBA programming skills, but I think you should be really, really good at structuring data in Excel and doing some, I mean, just basic things, just let's say using pivot tables or using some semi-advanced formulas like indirect or index match or something like that. It's not really taught at university. I think that's something that you should aim at doing. And also, most of the time when I get a problem or a project, the first thing I do is I have like big A3 papers in my office. So I try to draw out the storyline as early as possible. And this will, of course, take time for me, but it's extremely helpful later on. So that I only do the wasteful work in the beginning just to understand the output directly. Yeah, and you can't do everything. And I know there are different types of personality types. I, as a by nature, has been more data driven and wanting to understand the details of every problem, and that's fine. But what I need to understand then as well is that I need to develop my skill of being directional, and this is something that I actually been actively been doing for the past few years, to actually understand what is important, what is not important, to always have an try to train myself in not doing all of these things that is perhaps interesting, but most of the time will not add too much value to the project. And also, yeah, get to the point. What is the so what? I think even first week, if you start working within consulting, everyone will be more impressed by you if you create a slide that has a very clear so what, a very clear takeaway, rather than you doing a really cool Excel model. So creating impactful output that says what the so what is really, really important. And also, of course, beware of your spare time. This is always important, but I think working on projects, I mean, having a career within only working within projects is something that can consume a lot of your time, and beware of trying to manage your, I mean, work-life balance to understand what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And some things that I will give, I think I'll touch upon a few of these things, but these are more or less tips for you to understand what are hygiene factors and things that are important if you're going into to consulting. First of all, it's problem-solving skills. You should have a deep interest, at least, for identifying and solving complex problems. That's something that's quite important. And in the recruiting process, problem-solving skills is the most important part that they are looking for. And of course, Excel, once again, I think you should be quite, let's say, comfortable using Excel to train. I mean, there's so many different videos or different training modules online that you can use to just start building different types of models. Just gives you some sort of confidence in yourself, at least. Understanding the so what. I mean, once again, I need to emphasize this a lot. Understanding what is the key takeaway, what's the so what, and train on doing this already now when you're studying. You can actually do this in a safe place. Also, this is something, be proactive. Never ask a question from someone unless you at least have an hypothesis of a solution. So you ask a question and you also say that my solution would be to either do this or that. That shows also that you already thought about this and you're not only asking for help or are more or less need complete guidance. Show that you are someone that actually thought the problem through. Being a team player, enjoying working in teams is of course extremely important. And train on structuring. I mean, it goes back to the whole storylining and understanding the problem, structuring a framework or a story. Try to work on being able to logically structure problems and solution to create the timelines or the complete storyline of the project. And other things, I mean, this depends on where you want to work, of course, but strong grades and having some extra curriculum activities and stuff like that is always good. But once again, it depends on where you actually want to work. Okay, I had one more slide. Some things that, of course, I want to end by saying is that some of the key perks of working within consulting. Extremely great, yeah, I mean, depends, but I've never had as great colleagues as I've had within the consulting. You'll be most of the time, at least, especially if you're working at a bigger consultancy firm, you'll be exposed to people that in certain areas at least are smarter than you are, and you should take learning from that and see that as an absolute perk for your development. And you get the chance to work with important and complex business problems in different areas of the world and actually create real impact for these companies that you sometimes just, I mean, you read about, sometimes you even invest in some of them. And it's really enjoyable to come in and be just a stingray operation for transition or helping a problem with the real problem, helping a company with the real problems. Because that's what you do when you can actually make some sort of real position, real impact. And I think that's one of the best positions to be in, to actually be able to drive change in different companies or organizations. You can also build a global network. And once again, I mean, of course, I'm exaggerating a bit. I'm learning more in 1 week at BCG or similar firm than 5 years in college, but it is very steep, and that's because the pressure is so much higher. So I think that's one of the biggest perks of working within a well-established consultancy firm, is that you will be under pressure to actually solve real problems, and that forces you to actually bring out the best in you. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share. And are there any questions straight away?
I guess you can write it in the chat or simply open the mic and
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
ask it.
I have a question. It might be a silly one, but here we go. From your experience, what is the most effective team size to work with within management consulting? Do you prefer to work with small teams, bigger teams? Why? Why not?
Yeah, it depends on of the project and the size of the engagement. So I mean, it's a personal question, but I think most of the time, for the problem that you're working on, if you have a specific problem, I think it's much easier to work in a smaller team. But sometimes you might have 20 consultants at a firm, but we're working on different sub questions or sub modules to solve them. And I think most of the time it actually be working quite well. It hasn't been a problem. It's more or less still goes back to the things that I said in this as well. The overarching problem. If you have a clear view of what you need to create and the problem that you need to solve and the analysis you need to run, and you have clear expectations management internally and externally, it doesn't matter how big the team is. So I think those parts are really, really important. And I should say that I've been working with project leaders and partners as well that has been they're not at the same level. Some are really good at this and some are not as good. So the size of the team has been quite secondary. It's more or less about the persons that you'll be working with.
Thank you very much. I have a follow-up question.
Yep.
It's so yeah, as we said, the project is assessed on an individual basis. What is the engagement required? But once you are working with a management consulting firm inside, and you start delivering projects and you function as a high-performing team, what do you get to work within the same teams, or is this something that is being scrambled, so to say?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. If you're working in a bigger consultancy firm, yes. It works like this. I mean, for example, BCG is a bit of a bigger team. I mean, it's a global firm, but working at the Stockholm or the actual Nordic hub. Of course, I had wishes. I had areas that I wanted to excel within, some types of cases, both when it comes to industry and when it comes to topic areas. And sometimes I were able to work within these areas, but most of the time I couldn't do that from Stockholm. Then I was located in France, Germany, US, or something like that to work on those. And yes, the key is that very seldom did I work with the same team. I worked a lot with the same project leaders, but that was because we clicked and we worked well together. And then you more or less work a lot with those partners or project leaders. But the team, the team changes a lot, and that's why it's important that everyone has the same view on how to actually run project work. So that it's just a plug and play situation, more or less. But I mean, there are many smaller, really, really great consultancy firm. We call them boutiques, but I mean, there are sometimes a bit more niche, and there are between 10 and 40, 50 consultants. And in those cases, you will be working, of course, with the same colleagues more often. I mean, right now at the LTE Business, I work with the same team more or less all the time. And it's really rewarding as well, because we find the working models that works for us and the interaction models. And that's really great. But I mean, we're still recruiting and we're adding new persons as well there. And in those cases, we need to adapt. But if you're working in a bigger firm, yeah, most likely you will be working with different people.
Okay, that's great stuff. Thank you very much.
Let's see if we have some more. There's the chat.
So do we have any more questions?
otherwise, you can always just shoot me an email or something like that, and I'll try to be as helpful as I can.
Okay, then. Thank you very much, Niklas, for being here with us for the third or the fourth time in a row, and that was very good insights. I think it will be helpful, and even in the project work of the course. So thank you, Niklas, and I wish you a happy weekend.
Yeah, thank you, and nice meeting you all, and thanks for arranging this, Amar. So take care, have a happy weekend, and just shoot me an email if there's something that you're wondering about. Bye.
Take care. Have a nice weekend, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. See you later.
Bye.
Bye, Anna.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dark side. Dark side.
Давайте с нашей заебали уже. Да реально. Сука. Нахер ты с пушки. Я встал с ножей. С ножей, блядь, 20 стоит. Давай. Так 10. Очков больше. Блять, с пушки дают 10, а с ножей.
Что ты жалуешь?
Мелкие. Давай, нормально.
Почему там моё это?
Я говорю, с ножей дают 20. Можете очки расскажу? С ножей 20. Короче, с пистолета 11. Если хедшот с пистолета 12. Хедшот с оружия 1. поэтому, блядь, сложил 20-ку сразу. Эти очки нужны. 20-ку дают с ножей.
А на конце что такое?
Ну вот, с любого оружия десятку. Десятку. Так, смотри, 20. Очки получишь.
Я зачем их нажаю?
Ну, пик посылочный. Эти очки нужны или нет? Зачем ты нужен? Ну, давай на очки. 20-ка тебе с пестами. Ой, это с ножей. А с пестами 11. Хэдшот. Хэдшот 12 с пестами. Только с пестами. А хэдшот с обычным оружием 11 тоже.
Я всем по хедшотам иду, реально.
Мне очки не нужны, чё, давайте нормально. Ну чё? Придётся с ножей, что ли, играть? Хотите здесь?
Я не хочу.
Давай решим.
Ай,
Не хочу. Я хочу резать вас.
что ты там делаешь?
Я хочу просто резать. Что, не понятно? Да, вас резать. Вот. По-любому зарезаю. Я гарантирую. Я тебе гарантирую, что зарезаю. Черт. Увидел? Я все равно зарезаю. Зачем отказываться?
Ай, сейчас
Да,
человек в
больше-
гости ходит, хихики.
Так и будешь скорить? Не, вот это без подсколить. А вот это крутой чал. Он точно как бы вернулся.
Птичку.
Ну ничего, я сейчас полдургана. Есть, то и дургана зарезал.
У меня 10 здоровых. За 600.
Видишь, второго зарезал. Я буду резать твои дургану, пока ты... Нет, нет. Твои дургану, блядь, под ударом. Пока со мной не сгладишь. Я их зарежу, блядь. Всех. Вырежу. Ты не знаешь. Я охуел собачьим зарезать своих друганов. Не так вот друганов. Я тебе говорю. Пусть они там пуляют сын АВП. Но это не спасет.
Куда? Левый.
А нет, я им в спину зайду.
Правый.
Видел? Когда резал. Итак, пусть он гуляет. Он 10 очков получает, а я 20. Гуляет, поднять. Пошел туда. Так, смотри, кстати, Доргана. Ну, сейчас получится. Блять. Спинку. Все. Получил пизды. Получил и сделал ошибку. Давайте резаться. Ты чё не спугнул? Они боятся, или? Боятся ножей. Куда ты боишься? Они не боятся. Реально с ним резаться, не боятся нас. Идите, просто. Да чё трусливые, сука. Просто вперед надо. Они трусливые. Иди сюда, не надо, не надо. Трусливые, сука. Вот он трусливые-то, блядь. Че, боитесь, сука? Боитесь, что потом это посадили, да?
Hi team.
Let's go. Deploying smoke shield.
remove any doubts in your head. It's us or them.
Throwing smoke. Throwing incendiary. Throwing flashbang.
Flashbang.
Smoking.
Is B.
Throwing flashbang.
Let's give it to them, boys.
Throwing smoke.
Deploying flashbang. Deploying flashbang. Come on, chop chop.
Fire in the hole. Incendiary up. Deploying smoke
go, fellas. Laying down smoke. Throwing flashbang. Throwing flashbang. Counter-terrorists win.
This is it. Let's go.
Throwing smoke. Smoke.
Drawing fire.
Incendiary out.
Smoking.
Flashbang.
Flashbang.
Grenade. Bomb has been planted. Terrorists win. Let's have at it, mates. Throwing smoke. Deploying flashbang.
Fuck you! Fuck you! Noob!
Terrorists win.
Fuck you!
Go, go, go. Smoke.
Drawing.
Throwing flashbang. Defusing. We are out of here.
Throwing smoke. Incendiary out.
Laying down smoke.
Fire in the hole.
Throwing flashbang.
Flashbang out.
Mid. Short. Bomb. Short. Fuck.
These fellas are gonna regret waking up this morning.
Grenade out. Throwing incendiary.
Incendiary. Flashbang. Move it, son. Decoys out. Laying down smoke.
Deploying smoke shield.
Flashbang.
Throwing incendiary. Fire in the hole.
Throwing fire. Counter-terrorists win. Gear up. We aren't going on a windy walk here. Smoke.
Grenade out.
Deploying flashbang.
Deploying smoke shield.
Deploying flashbang.
Throwing fire.
Bomb has been planted.
I'm defusing. We're done! Let's go. Throwing smoke. Incendiary out. Grenade out.
Bomb has been planted. Terrorists win. We took
F1, please. Oh,
Gear up. We're going in. Throwing smoke.
Smoke
Go away, go.
Please tremble. Go, go, go. I'm throwing smoke. Flashbang. Throwing a flashbang. Flashbang.
Go away, go away.
Let's go, let's go. Smoke. Flashbang. Throwing smoke. Burn it to the ground. Throwing fire. Throwing fire. Grenade. I'm throwing a grenade.
Guys, fake A and B planted.
Forward. Planting. Bomb has been planted.
Defuse, defuse.
Let's go, let's go. They shall regret this day. Decoy is out. Smoke! Throwing a flashback. Throwing flashbang. Throwing fire. Smoke. Terrorists win. Go, go, go. Decoy. I'm laying down some smoke. I'm lighting it up. I am planting the bomb. Bomb has been planted. Terrorists win. Let's go! Let's go! I'm throwing smoke. Grenade! Throwing fire!
Knife, knife.
Come on, let's go! Let's Throwing smoke. Throwing a grenade.
Mid-cut.
Throwing flashbang. Terrorists win. Bomb has been planted.
Привет, хуесосы.
Нихуя себе.
Ой, извините, я не туда. Это не тот чат.
Позвони мне, где ты?
Grenade. Decoy.
Позвонить тебе?
Да, где ты, блядь?
Тебе позвонить? А ты
Да.
можешь чуть-чуть погромче говорить?
Может, мне тебе позвонить?
Нихуя себе, сетелки здесь?
Позвонить тебе? Дай номер, пожалуйста.
А ты соседей?
Глотки вытащите, говорите чуть-чуть погромче.
Блядь, с России ты?
Terrorists win.
Мальчики, привет.
Привет.
И тут у всех встал, да?
Надеюсь, нет.
Ахмед, опять пацан с бабой притворяешься. Не пизди, я знаю, что ты, блядь, мужик, блядь, нахуй. Меня, сука, не проведешь, пидорас, блядь.
Слышно,
что она потолкает, ты че, дебил?
Ассаламу
алейкум, рахматуллахи ва баракату, всем друзьям.
Всем алейкум ассалам.
Привет, братья. Привет, братья.
Грация. Ее талия. Она маленькая.
Спасибо за подсказку.
Зубками стянул бы с нее трусы.
Ну началось, блядь. Все, слышали бабский голос, блядь. Начинается.
Да вообще похуй. Гормоны бьют в голову. Да, отвечаю. Мид есть.
Расул, это не ты случайно?
Шорт проходит, плант, вы что? Помоги.
Мне помочь.
Сейчас они будут спасать, где они, блядь?
Плант у нас. Плант у нас. Вау. Жаки, будь случай.
Девочка, бомба.
Бомба на валяет.
Да нам похуй на бомбу.
Ти-ти-ти, бомба.
Там один остался, зарежьте его уже.
А я под Газманова в колготках танцевал, когда был мал. И нихуя не понимал.
Умри, бля.
Что она там пиздит? Наслали на нее?
Расул, это ты?
Да.
Не, реально, Расул тут есть?
Kotarem ziemię.
Паша Рембек
зашли.
Парни, а кто-нибудь болел короной?
Да бля, я уже 3-й раз их заболел.
Пожалуйста, скажите что-нибудь.
Ты знаешь просто, что тебе сказать, что такое заболеть?
Ну,
знаешь,
я не знаю, но у меня Кен
Братан,
заболел.
я, короче, лежал просто в комнате, а в соседней комнате матушка, понимаешь? И я думал, я сдохну, отвечаю. Все, я уже, слушай, я уже даже пацанам написал своим там в группе, что я говорю, пацаны, я походу сейчас отъеду.
Из-за чего, зачем?
Ну, из-за короны, короче, все, я задыхался, пиздец.
Да, бля,
ну, я как бы
Ну, потом расскажешь сейчас, когда
получишь.
Я как бы сам спортсмен, у меня легкие, пиздец, жестко как бы развито. И у меня тренер умер тоже из-за короны. Ты нахер.
На, ты этот смог туда кинул, расскажи по секрету.
Потому что он
дурачок. Всему свету.
Мне что-то кажется, это Б.
На.
Пидора, блядь, шапана.
Пошли в чем-то.
О, ты пришел. Давай дальше рассказывай.
Бомба на базе.
93-й регион откуда?
В чем? Краснодар.
Здорово, земляк.
Земляк? Ты откуда?
Краснодаре.
Я с Белореченска.
А я с Новороссийска.
Ну, короче, так сказать, в одной области. В одном крае.
В крае?
Ну да. Ну, в смысле, области на карте.
Кто там с Краснодара?
Ну, в общем, парни, я вам честно говорю, я делал пару шагов, у меня была такая жесткая одышка, но я сам спортсмен, ебать, очень. Ну, 11 лет я лыжным спортом занимался, и я делал пару шагов, вот, буквально. И можно сказать, что я чуть ли не в обморок падал. Одышка была жесткая.
Это ты из Краснодара?
А?
Ты из Краснодара?
Нет, я из Москвы. Ну, на Урале вырос, а живу в Москве.
Понял. Ну, ты рассказываешь, как коронавирусом болел?
Да, и ну жестко, я тебе реально говорю. Я пацанам сказал, что я сейчас сдохну, как бы маме не стал говорить.
Ну сейчас нормально все?
Да.
Короче, такое себе.
Слава богу.
У нас тут геологические проблемы со снятием квартиры.
Делать все, мне докторов не вызывал, ничего. Я просто другу написал, привези мне ингалятор, который от астматиков, короче. Понял, астматиков, который
там нет квартир, наверное, да?
И... Да, квартир тут нема, по сути, но, да.
И все, и мне стало легче намного.
Посад сходил. Тебя не слышно, ты 2 раза пыхнул.
Короче, бля, я чуть не умер, да, вот из-за этой всей движухи.
Почему? Сердечко?
Почему здесь сердечко? Нет, я тебе говорю, там же на легкие же все это делал, короче, послушай. Я делал у меня легкие, короче, я могу себя втянуть, но, бля, 5-литровую баклажку, вот, я думаю, я втянул бы в себя.
Нихера ты бы.
Но я лыжами занимался 11 лет, понимаешь? Сначала плаванием, а потом лыжами занимался. И вот мне как-то просто стало так хуёво, что я делал 2 шага, я 2 шага делал, и все, и у меня одышка, что я чуть ли сознание не терял.
Да не гони.
В смысле, гони.
Блять, да,
Гоню.
Че ты жуть нагоняешь?
Ты знаешь, какие я, блядь, втягиваю, блядь, водники, там все лохой, говорит, куда нахуй тебя только влазит?
Давай, хорош, ты чё?
Так я тебе отвечаю. Я говорю, да потому что я лыжей не занимался за
Так
хуя.
я тебе не хотел отдавать обратно. Ты чё, ее выронил, что ли?
Такие водники.
А, сука. Лоханул.
Шот, блядь.
Эвил, а тебе это на стене твои кореша писали комментарии или что?
Да хер узнает, ну и кореша, конечно. Не так вообще. Кто друзья добавлялся?
Пиздеть не мешки ворочать, да?
Ну, конечно.
Hello, my friends. Hello.
Your mama dead.
Thank you, bro.
Throwing flashbang. Flashbang, grenade out. Grenade
Чекай, не ломись.